Elias had spent years keeping the world off his property, but the sobbing from his decaying barn broke his silence. He found a widow clutching a waterproof bag like it was gold. She begged him not to call for help. When Elias saw the names written in her stolen ledger, he knew his quiet life was over. Elias Thorne hadn't spoken to another human being in 3 days, and that suited him just fine. The storm that had been battering Blackwood Creek County since Monday showed no signs of letting up, and the isolation it brought was almost comforting. Almost. The rain hammered the tin roof of his farmhouse with a violence that made conversation with yourself pointless. You couldn't hear your own thoughts, let alone your voice. But on that third night, when his sheepdog Buster started barking with an urgency Elias hadn't heard in years, he knew his solitude was about to end. Buster wasn't a dog that barked at shadows. The old border collie had been with Elias through enough real threats to know the difference between a possum in the henhouse and something that required human attention. And tonight, Buster wasn't just barking. He was howling, pacing back and forth at the kitchen door, his nails scratching frantically at the wood. Elias pulled on his rain jacket and grabbed the flashlight from the hook by the door. The cold hit him like a fist when he stepped outside, rain immediately soaking through his jeans. Buster shot past him, heading straight for the old barn at the edge of the property, the one Elias hadn't used in 5 years because the structure was barely standing. "Buster! Heel!" Elias shouted over the storm, but the dog ignored him completely. By the time Elias reached the barn, his boots were caked in mud and his hands were numb. The barn door was slightly ajar. He always kept it padlocked, but the chain was lying in the mud, cut clean through. Someone had broken in. Elias's first thought was copper thieves. There wasn't much left in the barn worth stealing, but desperate people did desperate things. He pushed the door open slowly, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The smell hit him first. Damp hay, rust, old engine oil, and something else. Something human. "I know you're in here," Elias called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Come out now, and we can talk about this." Silence. Then, from the far corner, behind the skeletal remains of a tractor his father had abandoned decades ago, came a sound that made Elias's blood run cold. It was a child crying. He moved the flashlight toward the sound and froze. Huddled under a pile of moldy horse blankets were 4 people, a woman and 3 children. The woman was thin, her face pale and drawn, eyes wide with terror. She was holding a baby against her chest, and 2 other children, a boy and a girl, pressed against her sides. All of them were soaking wet, shivering violently. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please don't call them." Elias lowered the flashlight slightly so it wasn't shining directly in their eyes. Buster had stopped barking and was now sitting near the family, his tail wagging slowly, as if he'd decided they weren't a threat. "Call who?" Elias asked carefully. "The police." The woman's voice broke. "If you call the police, they'll kill us." Elias had 3 rules for living alone on a 100-acre farm in the middle of nowhere. Rule 1. Mind your own business. Rule 2. Don't let anyone else's problems become yours. Rule 3. When in doubt, refer to Rules 1 and 2. But standing in that barn, looking at 3 children who couldn't have been older than 10, those rules suddenly felt a lot less solid. "I'm not calling anyone yet," Elias said slowly. "But you need to tell me what's going on." The woman clutched the baby tighter. "I can't. If I tell you, you'll be in danger too. Lady, you broke into my barn in the middle of a storm with 3 kids. I'm already involved." She stared at him for a long moment, and Elias could see her calculating, weighing her options. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Sarah Bennett. 5 days ago, my husband was murdered in our living room. They made it look like suicide, but it wasn't. And the people who killed him are the ones who are supposed to protect this town." Elias felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What people?" "Sheriff Vane, the town council, maybe more. I don't know how deep it goes." Sarah's hands were shaking. "My husband found something he wasn't supposed to find. He tried to go to the state police, but before he could, they came to our house. They shot him in front of our son." The older boy, he couldn't have been more than 10, looked up at Elias with eyes that had seen too much. The girl, maybe 6, was completely silent, her face buried against her mother's shoulder. The baby slept, oblivious. "And you ran," Elias said. "I grabbed the kids and everything I could carry and ran." Sarah's voice cracked. "I've been hiding for 5 days, moving every night. But my car broke down 2 miles from here, and I saw your barn. I thought if I could just rest for 1 night, just get the kids warm, I could figure out what to do next." Elias looked at the children again. They were soaked to the bone, their lips tinged blue from the cold. The baby's breathing sounded raspy, congested. These weren't criminals. They were victims. He broke his first rule right then and there. "Come on," he said, turning toward the door. "Let's get you inside." Sarah didn't move. "Why would you help us? You don't even know us." Elias looked back at her. "Because whatever your husband found, whatever got him killed, I don't know about it, and I don't want to. But I'm not going to let 3 kids freeze to death in my barn while I decide if your story is true." He started walking toward the farmhouse, and after a moment he heard footsteps behind him. Buster led the way, and Sarah Bennett and her children followed Elias Thorne out of the darkness and into a house that hadn't sheltered anyone but its owner in over a decade. What Elias didn't know yet was that by morning, his name would be on a list, and by nightfall, his farm would become a battlefield. Inside the house, Elias built a fire in the stone fireplace, while Sarah stripped the wet clothes off the children. He found old blankets in the linen closet. They smelled like mothballs, but they were dry and thick. He heated soup on the stove, and the children ate in silence, mechanically, their eyes never leaving their mother. Elias noticed things. He'd been trained to notice things. The bruises on Sarah's arms were defensive, grab marks, not the kind you got from falling. The boy, Leo, flinched every time Elias moved too quickly. The little girl, Mia, didn't make a single sound, not even when the hot soup burned her tongue. And the baby, Sam, had a cough that rattled in his tiny chest. "When's the last time you slept?" Elias asked Sarah. "I don't remember." She was staring into the fire, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. "Maybe 3 days? I couldn't risk it. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought they'd find us. You're safe here. For tonight, at least." Sarah looked at him with hollow eyes. "No one is safe. Not anymore." Elias didn't push. He showed her to the spare bedroom, his daughter's old room, though he didn't tell Sarah that. The children piled onto the bed together, and Sarah lay down beside them, fully clothed, her hand resting on a duffel bag she refused to let go of. "What's in the bag?" Elias asked from the doorway. "The reason they killed my husband. You gonna tell me what that is?" Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Tomorrow. If we're still alive tomorrow, I'll tell you everything." Elias closed the door and went back to the living room. He sat in his chair by the fire, his service rifle propped against the wall within arm's reach. Buster curled up at his feet, and for the first time in years, Elias Thorne didn't sleep alone in his house. But he didn't sleep much either, because something Sarah had said kept echoing in his mind. "If you call the police, they'll kill us." And Elias knew, deep in his gut, that she wasn't exaggerating. Morning came gray and cold, the storm still raging outside. Elias woke to find Leo standing in the doorway, watching him with those 2 old eyes. "Is my mom okay?" the boy asked quietly. "She's sleeping. So are your brother and sister." Leo nodded but didn't move. After a moment, he said, "I saw them kill my dad." Elias sat up slowly. "You don't have to talk about it. He told me to hide, in the closet, but I could see through the crack in the door." Leo's voice was flat, emotionless. "There were 2 of them. They wore uniforms. One of them was the sheriff. He shot my dad in the head, and then they put the gun in his hand to make it look like he did it himself." Elias felt a surge of anger so sudden and fierce, it surprised him. "Did your dad say anything before they came?" "He said he had proof, that he was going to make sure everyone knew what they did." Leo looked down at his hands. "He said we'd be safe soon. But we're not safe. We're never going to be safe." "Hey." Elias leaned forward. "You listen to me. Your mom is doing everything she can to protect you. And as long as you're in this house, I'm going to make sure nothing happens to you. Understand?" Leo met his eyes. "You don't know what they're like." "Maybe not. But I know what I'm like." Elias stood up. "Now go check on your mom. I need to go into town for supplies. Don't tell anyone we're here." "I won't." But as Elias drove his truck down the muddy road toward Blackwood Creek, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a promise he might not be able to keep. The general store in Blackwood Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and gossip traveled faster than the internet ever could. Elias kept his head down as he loaded supplies into his cart. Canned goods, bread, milk, medicine for the baby's cough. He was at the register when he saw the posters. They were taped to the window, the bulletin board, even the door. "Missing person," in bold red letters. Below that, a photo of Sarah Bennett, looking younger and happier than the woman currently hiding in his house. The text below read, "Sarah Bennett, 32, is wanted for questioning in connection with a domestic incident. She is believed to be traveling with 3 minor children and may be mentally unstable. If seen, do not approach. Contact Sheriff Vane immediately. Elias felt his jaw tighten. Mentally unstable. That's how they were going to spin it. A hysterical woman who kidnapped her own children after her husband's suicide. Terrible thing, isn't it? Elias turned to find Sheriff Silas Vane standing beside him, arms crossed, a sympathetic smile on his face. Vane was a big man, barrel-chested, with silver hair and a voice that sounded like honey poured over gravel. He'd been sheriff of Blackwood Creek for over 20 years, and everyone loved him. What's terrible? Elias asked carefully. That Bennett situation. Vane shook his head. Husband kills himself, and the wife can't handle it. Just snaps. Takes the kids and disappears. We've had search parties out for days, but with this storm. He gestured at the rain streaking the windows. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Sounds rough? You seen anything unusual out your way, Elias? Anyone passing through? Elias met Vane's eyes. There was something there, beneath the friendly concern. Something cold and calculating. Nobody comes out my way, Sheriff. You know that? True. True. Vane clapped him on the shoulder. But if you do see anything, a car parked where it shouldn't be, lights in an abandoned building, you give me a call, all right? That woman is dangerous. We need to find those kids before something bad happens. Sure thing, Sheriff. Elias paid for his supplies and left. As he loaded the truck, he could feel Vane watching him from inside the store. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that Sarah Bennett had been telling the truth. When Elias got back to the farm, Sarah was awake, pacing the living room with the baby on her hip. Leo and Mia sat on the couch, silent and watchful. I saw the posters, Elias said, setting the groceries on the kitchen counter. They're calling you mentally unstable, saying you kidnapped your own kids. Sarah closed her eyes. Of course they are. The sheriff talked to me, asked if I'd seen anything unusual. Did you tell him? No. Elias turned to face her. But we need to figure out what to do next because this farm isn't off the grid. If they're looking for you, they're going to check every property in the county eventually. Sarah set the baby down in a makeshift playpen Elias had built from old furniture. Then she picked up the duffel bag and opened it. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, the kind accountants used before everything went digital. Beside it was a USB drive in a waterproof case. My husband worked for the county assessor's office, Sarah said. He processed property transfers, agricultural subsidies, things like that. 6 months ago, he started noticing discrepancies. Payments going to farms that didn't exist. Land seizures that didn't make sense. He started digging. She opened the ledger and showed Elias pages of handwritten notes, dates, amounts, names. For the last 10 years, Sheriff Vane and the town council have been laundering cartel money through phantom agricultural subsidies. They'd seize land from struggling farmers, claim it was for public use, then sell it to shell companies at inflated prices. The farmers who resisted. She paused, her voice catching. They had accidents, or they killed themselves, or they just disappeared. Elias felt something cold crawl up his spine. Names. What names? Sarah flipped through the ledger and pointed. Elias saw them. Friends. People he'd known for decades. Gerald Moss, who'd been found drowned in his own irrigation ditch 5 years ago. Marcus Hale, whose barn burned down with him inside it 3 years ago. All ruled accidents. All unsuspicious. Jesus Christ, Elias whispered. My husband found all of this. He was going to take it to the state police, but somehow Vane found out. They came to our house that night. Leo was supposed to be asleep, but he heard the shouting. He hid in the closet and watched them kill his father. And you ran. I grabbed this. Sarah gestured to the ledger. And the kids, and I ran. I didn't even pack clothes. I just ran. Elias looked at the ledger, at the USB drive. What's on the drive? Audio recordings. My husband wore a wire to meetings. He recorded Vane and Councilman Drake discussing the next acquisition. They laughed about it. They laughed about killing people. Elias sat down heavily. This wasn't just corruption. This was a systematic criminal operation that had been going on for a decade, right under everyone's noses. And now, Sarah Bennett had the proof. We need to get this to the state police, Elias said. Or the FBI. How? Sarah's voice rose. My phone is dead. Yours is a landline. The roads are flooded. And even if we could get to a phone, how do we know who to trust? Vane has connections. He's been doing this for 10 years without getting caught. How many people is he paying off? Elias didn't have an answer for that. That's when they heard it. The sound of a car engine, slow and deliberate, coming up the long driveway to the farm. Elias moved to the window and pulled back the curtain just enough to see. A sheriff's department cruiser was rolling slowly up the drive, windshield wipers working against the rain. "Get the kids in the cellar," Elias said quietly. "What?" "Now, Sarah. There's a storm cellar under the barn. Take the kids and hide. Don't come out until I come get you." Sarah's face went white. "They're here? I don't know. But I'm not taking chances." Elias grabbed his rifle. "Go." Sarah scooped up the baby and grabbed Leo and Mia by the hands. "Come on, babies. We're going to play a game." They moved quickly, out the back door and across the muddy yard to the barn. Elias watched them disappear inside, then turned back to the front of the house. The cruiser had stopped. A single deputy got out. Young, maybe mid-20s, rain streaming off his hat. He approached the front door and knocked. Elias left the rifle leaning against the wall and opened the door. "Help you, deputy." The young man looked nervous. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Thorne. I'm Deputy Rawlings. Sheriff Vane asked me to check on all the properties in this sector. We're still looking for Sarah Bennett and her children. Haven't seen anyone. Mind if I take a quick look around, just to be thorough?" Elias's mind raced. If he refused, it would look suspicious. But if he let the deputy search, there might be something. A wet footprint, a child's toy, that would give them away. "Sure," Elias said finally. "But make it quick. I've got work to do." Deputy Rawlings stepped inside, water dripping off his coat. His eyes scanned the living room, the kitchen, the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Elias watched him carefully, looking for any sign that he'd seen something. "You live out here alone?" Rawlings asked. "For 10 years now. Must get lonely." "I prefer it." Rawlings walked slowly through the house, opening doors, peering into rooms. When he got to the spare bedroom, the one where Sarah and the kids had slept, he paused. Elias's heart hammered in his chest. The bed was made. Elias had insisted Sarah make it before they'd seen the posters, some instinct telling him to cover their tracks. But there, on the nightstand, was something Elias hadn't noticed. A child's drawing. Rawlings picked it up. It was a crayon sketch of a house and a family, stick figures with smiling faces. In the corner, in a child's handwriting, was written, "Leo." The deputy turned to look at Elias, and his expression had changed. "Mr. Thorne," he said slowly, "is there something you want to tell me?" Elias's hand moved to the pistol holstered at his hip, a movement so subtle Rawlings didn't notice at first. But when he did, the young deputy's eyes widened. "Easy," Elias said quietly. "Let's not do anything stupid. Mr. Thorne, if you're harboring a fugitive, she's not a fugitive. She's a witness." Rawlings blinked. "What? You ever wonder why Gerald Moss drowned in 6 inches of water? Or why Marcus Hale's barn burned down on the same night his smoke alarms mysteriously failed?" Elias took a step forward. "You ever ask those questions, deputy? I don't know what you're talking about." "Yeah, you do. You just don't want to admit it." Elias gestured to the drawing. "That woman and her kids are hiding because your boss murdered her husband. And if you turn her in, you're complicit in murder." Rawlings's face had gone pale. "Sheriff Vane wouldn't what? Kill someone? He's been doing it for 10 years. Elias watched the deputy carefully. "Now you've got a choice. You can walk out of here and pretend you didn't see anything. Or you can do the right thing and help me protect that family." For a long moment Rawlings stood frozen, the drawing still in his hand. Then he set it down carefully on the nightstand and looked at Elias. "I can't help you," he said quietly. "But I didn't see anything here. Understand?" Elias nodded slowly. "Understood." Rawlings walked to the door, then paused. "If you're telling the truth about the sheriff, you need to get that family out of here. Tonight. Because Vane isn't going to stop looking. And when he finds her, he won't care who gets in the way." "I know." The deputy left, and Elias watched the cruiser drive away. But instead of relief, all he felt was dread. Because Rawlings was right. Vane wouldn't stop. And Elias had just put himself directly in the line of fire. Elias went to the barn and found Sarah and the kids huddled in the storm cellar, a damp concrete bunker his father had built during the Cold War. It smelled like earth and rust, but it was hidden beneath a trapdoor covered with old hay bales. "It's okay," Elias said, helping them out. "He's gone." "Did he see us?" Sarah's voice was frantic. "No, but he found a drawing Leo left in the bedroom." Sarah turned to her son, who looked down at the ground, ashamed. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to." "It's okay, baby." Sarah pulled him close. "It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Elias could see it in her eyes. They were running out of time. Back in the house, Elias made a decision. He went to his office, a small room he rarely used, and pulled out an old lockbox from the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a flip phone he kept for emergencies, a relic from his days in the military. It was a burner, untraceable, and he'd kept it charged all these years out of habit. He dialed a number he hadn't called in over a decade. The line rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. "Who the hell is this?" "Carter, it's Elias." There was a pause. "Elias Thorne? Jesus, I thought you were dead." "Not yet." Elias kept his voice low. "I need a favor. Must be serious if you're calling me." "It is. I need you to make a call to the state police. Tell them there's a fugitive situation in Blackwood Creek, but it's not what they think. Tell them Sheriff Vane is dirty, and there's a witness with evidence." "Evidence of what?" "Murder. Money laundering. A decade's worth of corruption." Carter whistled. "You're not messing around." "No, I'm not. Can you make the call?" "I'll do it." "But Elias, if you're going up against a corrupt sheriff in the middle of nowhere, you're going to need more than a phone call. Those guys don't play nice." "I know. Watch your back." "I will." Elias hung up and looked at Sarah, who was standing in the doorway with the baby on her hip. "What did you do?" she asked. "I called in a favor. State police should be here by tomorrow." "And if Vane comes tonight?" Elias met her eyes. "Then I'll make sure he doesn't leave." Night fell like a curtain, and with it came a stillness that was more terrifying than the storm. The rain had stopped, but the silence it left behind was thick and oppressive. Elias sent Sarah and the kids back to the storm cellar with blankets, water, and the baby's medicine. He told them not to come out unless he came for them personally. Then he began preparing the farm. He'd learned a lot in his years as a combat engineer, and one of the most important lessons was that terrain was everything. He knew every inch of this property, where the ground was soft, where the old fences could be rigged as tripwires, where someone approaching would have to slow down. He set up floodlights around the perimeter, wired to motion sensors. He placed empty cans filled with gravel along the fence line. Crude alarms, but effective. He checked his rifles, his ammunition, his emergency medical kit, and then he waited. At 11:47 p.m. the power went out. Elias felt his pulse quicken. That wasn't the storm. Someone had cut the lines. He moved to the window and scanned the darkness. At first, he saw nothing. Then, one by one, flashlights appeared in the tree line. 4 of them, moving slowly, deliberately, toward the house. They weren't here to arrest Sarah. They were here to erase the problem. Elias grabbed his rifle and slipped out the back door. He moved low and fast, using the shadows to his advantage. He could see them now. 4 men, all armed, all wearing tactical gear. No uniforms, no badges. This was a hit squad, plain and simple. One of them approached the farmhouse and doused the front porch with gasoline. Elias's blood turned to ice. They were going to burn it down, with everyone inside. He raised his rifle, sighting the man with the gas can. 1 shot, center mass. The man dropped, and chaos erupted. The other 3 scattered, taking cover behind trees and equipment. Gunfire erupted, bullets slamming into the side of the house, the barn, the ground around Elias. He returned fire, methodical and precise, forcing them to keep their heads down. But he was outnumbered and outgunned, and he knew it was only a matter of time before they flanked him. Then the barn exploded into flames. The fire spread faster than Elias could have imagined, fueled by old hay and decades of accumulated dust. The barn was a towering inferno within minutes, lighting up the night sky like a beacon. Elias's first thought was Sarah and the kids, but the storm cellar was underground, protected by concrete and steel. They'd be safe from the fire. What they wouldn't be safe from was suffocation if the smoke got too thick. He had to end this. Now. Elias moved through the darkness, using the terrain he knew by heart. The men hunting him didn't know the property. They didn't know where the old irrigation ditch ran, deep and slick with mud. One of them found it the hard way, his flashlight spinning wildly as he fell, his shout cut off by the sound of his body hitting the water. 2 left. Elias circled around, coming up behind one of them. The man was focused on the house, rifle raised, waiting for movement. Elias didn't hesitate. He brought the butt of his rifle down on the back of the man's head, and he dropped like a stone, 1 left. And then Elias heard it. A voice, amplified by a megaphone, cutting through the roar of the flames. "Elias Thorne, I know you're out there." It was Sheriff Vane. Elias moved toward the sound, staying low. He found Vane standing near the burning barn, and beside him, held at gunpoint, was Leo. "Show yourself," Vane shouted, "or the boy dies." Elias felt his world narrow to a single point. He'd failed. Somehow Vane had gotten into the cellar. He had Leo. Slowly, Elias stood up, hands raised, rifle hanging from its strap. "Let him go, Vane." The sheriff turned, his face illuminated by the firelight. He looked almost cheerful. "Well, well. The hermit of Blackwood Creek finally shows himself. Let the boy go. This is between us." "Oh, I don't think so." Vane pressed the gun against Leo's head. The boy's face was pale, streaked with tears, but he didn't make a sound. "You see, Elias, you made a very stupid mistake. You got involved in something that had nothing to do with you. Her husband was murdered. You killed him. He was stealing from us. What did you expect?" Vane's smile didn't waver. "This town runs on order, and order requires sacrifice. Bennett understood that when he signed his employment contract. He just forgot. So you executed him. I eliminated a problem." Vane's tone was casual, like they were discussing the weather. "And now I'm going to eliminate another one. Where's the ledger?" "Safe." "Not good enough. Tell me where it is or I put a bullet in this kid's brain." Elias looked at Leo, at the terror in his eyes, and made a decision. He couldn't win this with a gun, but maybe he could win it another way. "You really want that ledger, Vane? Fine. It's in the barn, the storm cellar. Go get it." Vane's eyes narrowed. "You think I'm stupid? I think you're desperate. That ledger is the only thing standing between you and a life sentence. Without it, I'm just a crazy hermit making accusations. With it, you're finished." Vane stared at him for a long moment. Then he shoved Leo forward. "Move, both of you, into the barn." They walked toward the burning structure, heat rolling off it in waves. The entrance to the cellar was in the back corner, still accessible despite the flames. Vane kept his gun on them as they descended the concrete steps. Inside the cellar, Sarah and Mia were huddled in the corner, the baby crying in Sarah's arms. "Where is it?" Vane demanded. Sarah didn't move, didn't speak. Vane raised his gun. "Last chance." That's when Elias made his move. He lunged, slamming into Vane, driving him against the wall. The gun went off, the shot deafening in the confined space, but it went wide. Elias grappled with him, years of pent-up rage fueling his strength. Above them, the barn groaned, timber cracked. And then, with a roar like a dying beast, the hayloft collapsed. Tons of burning wood and debris crashed down, sealing the cellar entrance. Dust and smoke filled the air, choking and blinding. Elias pinned Vane to the ground, his forearm pressed against the man's throat. "Say it!" Elias growled. "Say what you did." Vane struggled, gasping for air, but Elias didn't let up. "Say it! I killed him!" Vane choked out. "I killed Bennett, and I'd do it again!" Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "I'm recording this." Elias looked over and saw her holding up her phone, the screen glowing in the darkness. She'd captured every word. Vane's face went slack. He'd confessed. On record. Elias released him and staggered back. Above them, they could hear the fire still raging, but the cellar was holding. "For now. We need to get out of here," Sarah said, her voice shaking. Elias looked at the blocked entrance, then at the far wall. His father had built this cellar with an escape tunnel, a precaution from a paranoid era. It led to the edge of the property, far from the house and barn. "This way," he said. They moved quickly, Vane stumbling ahead of them at gunpoint. The tunnel was narrow and dark, but it was intact. They crawled through it, one by one, until they emerged into the cold night air. Behind them, the barn collapsed completely, sending up a column of sparks that lit up the sky. And in the distance, they heard the sound of sirens. The state police arrived 20 minutes later, followed by fire trucks and ambulances. Elias's farm was a disaster zone. The barn was gone, the house was damaged, and the land was scarred by fire and chaos. But Sarah Bennett and her children were alive, and Sheriff Silas Vane was in handcuffs, his confession recorded, his crimes finally exposed. The state police took statements. They seized the ledger and the USB drive. They arrested 3 deputies and 2 town councilmen before sunrise. The corruption ring that had controlled Blackwood Creek for a decade crumbled in a single night. As the sun rose over the smoldering ruins, Elias stood in his field, watching paramedics check over the kids. Leo was quiet but unharmed. Mia still hadn't spoken, but she clung to her mother. Sam slept peacefully in Sarah's arms. Sarah approached Elias, her eyes red-rimmed. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to. You saved our lives. You gave me a reason to care again. Elias looked at the ruins of his barn. I'd forgotten what that felt like. Sarah hesitated, then reached out and squeezed his hand. Where will you go? Nowhere. This is still my home. I'll rebuild. And us? The state police are setting you up with witness protection. You and the kids will be safe. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll never forget what you did. Just make sure those kids grow up safe. That's all I ask. They said their goodbyes, and Elias watched as Sarah and her children were loaded into a state police vehicle. Leo looked back at him through the window, and for the first time, Elias saw something other than fear in the boy's eyes. He saw hope. 3 months later, Elias stood in front of his rebuilt barn, hammer in hand, Buster at his feet. The structure was smaller than the old one, but it was solid. It would stand for another generation. He'd received a letter from Sarah the week before. She and the kids were safe, living under new names in a new state. Leo was back in school. Mia was starting to talk again. Sam was healthy. Vane and his co-conspirators were awaiting trial. The evidence was overwhelming. Justice, slow and imperfect, was finally being served. Elias finished hammering the last nail and stepped back to admire his work. The farm was quiet again, isolated, just the way he liked it. But that night, for the first time in years, he left the door unlocked. And when Buster scratched to come inside, Elias let him. The dog curled up by the fire, and Elias sat in his chair, a book in his lap he didn't read. He thought about Sarah and the kids, about Leo's courage, about the terrible secret that had almost destroyed them all. And he thought about Gerald Moss and Marcus Hale and all the others who hadn't survived Vane's reign. Their deaths hadn't been in vain. The ledger had seen to that. Elias Thorne had spent 10 years building walls to keep the world out. But sometimes, he realized, the world came to you whether you wanted it or not. And when it did, you had a choice. You could close the door and pretend you didn't see, or you could open it and fight. Elias had made his choice, and he'd do it again. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable story, where fate and courage meet in ways you never imagined. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us continue bringing more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.